Now let's see who is our next speaker. So he is a seasoned user experience researcher specializing in mixed methodologies, committed to generating actionable insights from rigorous research. He plays a key role in informing product and business decisions, and currently he is working on improving monitoring and observability systems at Meta's Data Infra department.
He's going to talk about measuring UX for monitoring tools. And let's welcome on stage Sotiris Sotiropoulos.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's great having you.
Hello, everyone. Let's check. Can you hear me all right? Hello, everyone. My name is Sotiris Sotiropoulos. It's quite easy for me to say my name in Greece because I have only to say it once. People don't understand it quite easily in the UK. I'm a user researcher at Meta in monitoring observability tools, all the internal organization that works with preventing incidents. But I will like to discuss one of a few things about how we measure user experience and what ways do we use in my team and what I have seen in the past work well for these tools. But first of all, I'd like to do the most researchy thing in the world and kind of ask you a few questions. How many of you here are engineers? Show of hands, please. Okay, almost the majority of you. Keep them up. How many of you are SREs, like site reliability engineers, on-calls, or have anything to do with monitoring observability? Okay, a smaller portion, okay. Any product people in the room? People that work in UX, product management, research, design? Wow, we're very, very few, but we have two hands, I like that. Okay, lovely to meet you all. You probably be wondering why on earth does a user researcher has to do a talk about observability systems. These are systems that are made from engineers, by engineers, for engineers. There are CLI platforms mainly, lots of big dashboards, lots of data. So I asked exactly the same question when I joined my team about 2.5 years ago. What can I contribute to this team? What can be possibly useful for them? And I recognized the problem that it's a common problem with many teams. How is it possible for a team that is producing software so fast and in such a critical kind of domain to have some impact and understand and know that impact to our users before release? Is there a way to assess this today, before release? Because releases come and go quite often, but usually, as we will see, we learn what is going on and the impact of our work way down the line. But is there a way to do this today, before a release? Let's talk a bit quickly about observability. I'm not going to dive into specifics here, just a high level to understand the criticality of this. This is IBM's kind of high level, I think, the best possible definition of SIN that refers to the internal state or condition. How can we understand that condition of a system in order to fix problems? That's the short version of it. And the better way that these systems are established and set up in a team, they can accurately identify performance issues. There's a large variety of telemetry platforms, data collection, lots of data collection happening in these platforms, internal metric states. There's a lot of logs and traces that are being counted with one unique purpose: to identify, detect, investigate potential incidents that are happening and recover from those incidents. Throughout this presentation, I'll be referring to them as either incidents or SEVs, site events. But before we dive into the particular stuff of the journey, let's think about our users, the first thing that we observe always in this situation. Who's using these platforms to begin with? We have a service and we have a service-owning team. This service-owning team has a set of engineers. Of course, everyone's an engineer in this service-owning team. And what they do is multiple rotations, weekly by weekly, depending on your team, depending on the size. Your mileage may vary. And through these IROCs, or instance response on-calls, maybe also be called SREs, site reliability engineers. They are responsible for the maintenance of this service and making sure that nothing bad will happen. They are the first to be notified if something goes wrong. And then there's the other side, other teams in the same or a different org that are the customers of our customers, the users of our users, right? They're also handling these services and they're trying to make the best out of it. The main impact, if a service is down, is going to affect them immediately and their services. It's like a domino effect. One thing is not working, therefore 5 things are not working. They will acknowledge the implications quite significantly. There is an observability journey, an end-to-end. Again, there are many variations of it, but in the beginning, there is a particular incident that is happening. It might be a form of outage, CPU outage, latency outage. A more simple thing that a user will experience is Facebook comments are down, or there is a particular UI layout in an app that's broken. All that because of a bad push or bad code. The recent CrowdStrike event last summer was one of those kind of potential issues of a bad push that collapsed the whole industry when it came to flights in every airport, if you remember that one. After an incident happens, there are a lot of systems that pick up that incident, and the better the detection platforms are set up, the better and quicker those incidents are being recognized. The on-call is being notified via an SMS, a push notification, another means of getting any sort of message visually, but also in terms of escalation, it might also be a phone call. Then the on-call just jumps into one of those platforms. They're quite heavy in data. They're looking needles in a haystack. They might be looking on a specific spike or a specific deep of the data that crossed the threshold and for how long that threshold was crossed. Complicated dashboards with a lot of information. Then the investigation begins. It involves a lot of debugging, but first we need to kind of understand how the users are thinking at this point. And if you're familiar with the Kahneman's model of System 1 and System 2, this applies perfectly here, because System 1 is what the engineers are doing immediately to understand if it's a true positive or a false positive associated with the incident that they observed. And also the second layer, which involves the System 2 layer, which involves a thorough root cause analysis that these users have to undertake in order to begin their mitigation, practically the actual debugging situation to fix the problem. All of this is documented properly every step of this process to make sure that we improve, we are prepared for the next time this event happens, and of course to prevent similar events happening. Very similar to today's talk, Sanders mentioned it at the first talk today about Shuhari, the different kind of layers of learning that you see, you observe something, and then you go back and do it again and again until you kind of develop a habit for it. The SREs share a lot of common principles with the Bene Gesserit for every Dune fans in the house. They do not believe in hope at all. They prepare properly. They do a series of tests beforehand. They set up the tools in a way to make sure that they do not, nothing bad happens in that case again. Since we're geeking out, any strategy tabletop fans in the house? Any people playing strategy games, tactical games at all? We had a very nice conversation at the break. I wouldn't do this. So one of the core concepts in strategy games is the concept of visibility. Very similar to observability, but I'll use this analogy in a different way here. So visibility is practically if you can see your target and your target can see you. Any Warhammer fans out there? And practically to assess your next strategy, your next steps. And how does this apply to research, though? Because that's the next thing I'd like to kind of dive into in a better way. We have a typical assessment allocation of a platform, the product team, and our users. This can be applied to monitoring platforms, but it can also apply to any single product, what I'm about to say in the next few minutes. There is an interaction between the platform and the users, right? This interaction is happening all the time. The user inputs some data, they get some feedback back. We want to, as a team, as a product team, our goal is to improve that interaction, is to improve the platform, of course, but mainly to improve the life of the user, to make their actions more efficient and effective. However, in that act of trying to improve things, we are quite limited on the visibility that we have in this interaction. We do not always have all the data required to find what's going on. There are ways to break that barrier, that invisible barrier. We have analytics and A/B testing, where what we do there is we use tailored events to measure what the user is doing, their behavior, through the system, which is a proxy. What I'm using the word proxy here is that we collect a lot of quantitative data and make deductions to understand our users. What we see is their behavior, what they do. What we don't see, and that's the downside of this methodology, is their intention. Was it actually that, the task that they completed, what they wanted to do at the beginning, right? The user wanted to book a ticket, they booked a ticket in Australia, where initially they wanted to do so in Italy, or on a different date. And that's a very big problem, because at the end, the user, when they complete the task, they might not be aware of their failure. At the other side of things, we can skip that and go on the survey side of things, or for more product mature teams, user interviews. We try to go back and listen to users one-on-one, or ask for the feedback online, or through an intercept survey. We collect qualitative data, mainly. Depending on the survey, that might be quant as well. And understand their predisposition to a system. Was this helpful for you? Was this useful for you? This kind of question, to understand more about their journey. We have absolutely no visibility what the user did in that journey and when. They might have used the software 3 months ago and might not even remember what was going on. Or they might have done so yesterday, but we have never seen this interaction. We are completely lacking the visibility there. We just have to take the word for it. There's a third methodology. It's the most common user research methodology that's being used, usability testing. You might have heard of it. It's also the most misinterpreted and misused one as a methodology when it comes to research. We do not just showcase 2 screens to users and ask them, which one do you like? That's not usability testing. What we do in usability testing, we bring 3 sides of the same coin. We bring the users, the product team, and the product in one place. And this refers mainly to what we call moderated usability testing. And this allows us to have visibility in both sides and collect both sides of data to observe users while they complete a task in front of our eyes. There's a facilitator and that watches them do it, right? And that's really important because the data that we collect is actionable, and we have seen their failures directly. You can use a moderated version as well. We'll talk about this in a while. And of course, you would say, and that's true for every research methodology, no one methodology solves the case in every situation, right? You have to triangulate, you have to use multiple methodologies, collect data from different sides, and synthesize this data to get a holistic view. And most teams use qualitative and quantitative as a means of triangulation, use different methodologies to do that, to learn the why and the how, and how much, or how many. There's another dimension, the behavioral and attitudinal dimension, what people do and what people say they do, which are not quite often the same things, but attitude drives behavior as well, according to behavioral science, at least, and many papers written in that department. So we need all 4 dimensions to understand and have a holistic view about our users. And again, one single methodology is never sufficient enough. If we conduct usability testing, then we need to run a series of user interviews. Or if we run a survey, then we need a different methodology to extract diary study, for example, to understand further how the users are behaving. But what tools do we actually need to measure this? In order to do so and measure something, we need to define what we want to measure. When we set up any form of methodology, as the ones I mentioned, especially with usability testing, we want to make sure that we probe for the right things. If we just showcase something to users and ask them, did you like this? This is an absolutely useless response that we're going to get. We don't care if they like it, especially when we're talking for observability tools. We're interested if it solves a problem and if they can use it, or different other things. Before I dive deeper into this, any thoughts on DevOps platforms, back-end, back-office platforms? Which one of these constructs do you think relates the most? Which one do you think is the most important? Don't be shy. Wow, you hit the spot then. Fantastic. Any other thoughts? What may be very, very important in these platforms? Sorry, I have too much light. Or maybe the opposite. What is completely useless to measure in these platforms? Satisfaction, I hear someone say. That's interesting. To be honest, everyone that you pick from this can be applied also to other domains, B2C or B2B. We found through many iterations that these were the top most important ones for us and in these platforms and in these journeys. However, it's a prioritization exercise. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the rest of them are useless. It's that we have to identify the relationship with what we were looking for. We began with very quickly on how we did this, because this might be relating to you. We have a primary set of constructs. Constructs are practically the dimensions we want to probe for, what we want to understand, what we want to learn, what's important for our product, our business, and our users, right? We set them as a hypothesis. And then we did a lot of generative user testing, which means a lot of user interviews across multiple journeys, multiple user tasks, all related to the platforms that we're trying to assess. And we noticed which was the dimension that caused the biggest impact in what we called engineering productivity. Nothing like the productivity that it was mentioned in lines of code on the first talk, but more about the efficiency and effectiveness of how they actually go about and solve an incident that has been raised as an on-call engineer. And then we eliminated some of those constructs. They were secondary to our scope, of course, and we're still developing this, so it's a kind of a work in progress, but we have been doing a lot of progress on this. Let's have a quick look of how we measured each of one of those dimensions, starting with usability and utility. Usability has to do with how easy it is a tool to use. Can they actually use it? That's the question. Can they use this particular journey or function? And the second one is utility. Does it solve a problem? We used a particular instrument, a standardized one, created by Jeff Sauer and Jim Lewis, called UMOX Lite. It comes as a self-reported question, Likert scale, 7-point scale, which is delivered post-task to the user, which means they completed the activity through the usability test, and then they answer the question. Not 5 months later, and not through a pop-up on a website that we did not know what they did. We observed that they actually failed, or succeeded, and then we asked them that question. If the second of this question fails, there's no reason for us to create that feature immediately, because there's a follow-up to this, is to understand, and that's a qualitative type of question, to understand better what and why does this not solve the problem. And we can either change a user segment and go to different users, or stop developing this tool, or adopt this tool for this particular segment. It's a strategy answer, which of the three we're doing. Second one, the one that Paris mentioned, is mental effort. There's a lot of focus that is being required and information to be processed and digested by the engineers in these tools in a very short time. The delays and the confusions that are caused in the systems impact the reaction time to recover from these incidents. We use NASA TLX. TLX stands for Task Load Index. NASA developed this for their astronauts to ask them after the simulation that they were conducting. There's a 7-item instrument that they're using. That's a short one, and the long one is, I think, over 20 items. Lots of questions then. The majority of them focused on the physical aspect of it, not the mental aspect of their effort. In this case, we just picked the one item that was more relevant to what we're doing. And we're using only this question to understand and follow up and understand further how well or not well the task is helping them to not make too many things, not have to think about too much information, not have to push too hard in order to solve an incident. When an alert comes up, as I mentioned earlier, they have to find the data and mitigate this as fast as possible. We do not to add more to their load. Plus, it's not the only thing that they will be doing this day. They will be developing software as well. This is still a work in progress as well. We're trying to develop with my team a more tailored solution to our needs, specific to our platforms. But it requires several iterations. I highly suggest to any team that wants to follow this approach, to do a lot of cognitive testing before assessing this. This is a effectiveness which practically is measured through task completion. So you have a usability test. The user either succeeds or they fail. It's a definite task. You have to submit a form, you have to buy a ticket, you have to create a health check. Whatever of those things are, there's a defined end point that the user knows and we know. And we can assess in the end whether they failed or not the task. We take the ratio of this and we try to measure what was the success rate. Now think about a sample of 10 users. Something very simple. We're talking about moderated testing here. So you bring in 10 users, one by one, not all at the same time, of course. And you start asking them to complete this activity separately. And they go about, and one of them fails. That's a 10% in our sample, right? If we infer that to the general population to see how will that affect our general audience, our user base, we will get something like this with a margin of error. That's it. The true nature of it lies, the true number lies within these values. I'm not going to go deep into statistics here, so bear with me. The larger the sample size, of course, the better and more accurate these numbers become. We're not interested in accuracy at this point. Where before release, we just picked a small sample. What we're interested to see is direction. How bad is this? You cannot see how bad this is with one user, but here, let's increase the numbers to 3 failures. So we asked 10 users to create a new health check through a series of steps in our platform. 3 of them completely failed it. They didn't manage to do it either within the time frame that we gave them, which they don't know usually, or with the given tools that they had at their disposal at that point. That means that if we generalize this, we have a true value in our population between 10 and 61%. The question is, at this point, which one of those numbers do we look at? We look at the best case scenario, that 10%, right? What would happen if we were to release this today in our user base? What will happen will be that there's a highly likely event that 10% of our users will fail that in our user base. I'm not taking the worst scenario of 61%, right? Not being a bearer of bad news, just a 10%, a small sample, a small side of this. Now, there's a problem. If you have 10,000 users, that's 1,000 users there. It's 10%. It's a big number. And imagine those users being SREs, being on-call engineers that they rely on this platform, and their tasks are failing. This is huge in terms of costs. We improve the accuracy, of course, by increasing the sample. Not every team is able to do that. It's not easy for every team to do weekly or bi-weekly sessions of 20 users to have significant numbers and make comparisons with them. But you can switch to more unmoderated usability testing as well, increase your numbers even further, and decrease that if you are looking for accuracy. Again, it's not always a matter of accuracy at this point. You can A/B test that as well. Findability and trust are two dimensions that were really problematic because they were both connected with information architecture, with the information that is presented to our users, the way that you navigate from one piece of information to another. We take findability as a performance metric, and we measure it exactly the same way for each piece of information that is important as we do task completion. So, did the users find this information, yes or no? That information, of course, has to be relevant to the task. And the second one is credibility measurement, very similar to what I explained earlier, self-reported scale, of course. The qualitative aspect is more important of this, to follow up with what wasn't working for them, what information was not there to find. This is based on the work of Jesse James Garrett. He created this structure of how the user experience layers are created, starting from something very abstract, going to more concrete stuff. This is your strategy, which is why are you building this particular product, and at the top is the surface, which is practically the UI, like the stuff that are cheap, quote unquote, to change. Because if you fail here, you have to destroy everything you've done in between. By the way, quick plug on this one, just James Garrett is invited to the UX Greece conference next month. You might look it up on LinkedIn. There's a Q&A with him. Great guy, and he did that back in 2002, before UX was cool. And the layer that we focused most is the structure layer, where we have interaction design and information architecture, which means, in simple terms, where is this information and how can I navigate from one piece of information to another? The information may be displayed as a chart, as a table, as a list of items. It doesn't matter. All these things are part of the problem, and that's what we want to improve. We do have bring all this together into UX scorecard. I don't like the term, to be honest, but that's the one that we use right now. It showcases the quality of our user experience, how good or bad things are in this particular journey that we tested, right? Therefore, to the entire product eventually. We have the top 6 dimensions I mentioned. I highlighted the ones that were even more important, the ones that we look at first, and that they have the bigger weight in our analysis, because each one has its own weight. Funny enough, the one that was mentioned before, the mental effort, is number 1 in weight, has the highest weight in the measurements that we do. And we get a score back. That score is referred to the alert creation journey, for example, in our detection journey, right? There are areas that are improvements that have been improved, and there are areas that we are lacking a lot of stuff and we want to improve, and you can showcase it by this. We don't only look on the big number, we look on the areas that we are lacking. And you may notice 2 different thresholds, 2 different baselines here. The red one is the no-go area. If we fall on everything below that line, we do not release. If we cross it, that's good. Let's go with 1 release, but let's iterate it later on. And if we cross the green line with 1 or all of them, happy days. This is a very good kind of result for the team. We're serving our users with the best possible experience that they may have. I'm actually not sure if this is a good attribution of this quote. I searched a lot about this one. There's been a lot of false attribution, but it still stays true. And the way that we see this is that we're not measuring for the sake of measuring. We're measuring all this in order to compare. And we can do 4 types of comparisons with a new feature or a new journey that we're building and we're trying to improve. We can measure the new version versus the old version. We can measure the new version versus another new version, possibly close to an A/B test. You lost me? No, I'm here? Here. You can measure the new version versus a competitor, and you can measure against a specific threshold, as the ones that I showed you earlier on. But let's bring this all together on the impact of this. Why all this measurement? Why all these details here? This is a typical production life cycle. Might be very similar to the one you use in your team. It might look different. This is 1 cycle of work, might be multiple, depending on how often your team releases. There's implementation, there's release, and of course, there's user testing, right? We all test with our users before we release, don't we? And that's the important thing that we're trying to see here. When we release, it takes some time for the users to onboard, then to use it, and then make it part of their everyday working habits, right? The metrics there come back with a small delay. It might take, the numbers may vary, of course, for your case, but it might take days for onboarding to happen. It might take weeks for actual usage, numbers to ramp up. It might take months for them to come back and make this kind of retention cycle as users. In order to get valuable insights, we have to wait for a bit longer than the release date. It's not like we're releasing something and everybody runs. This time span harms a lot of our decisions. It makes them very difficult, and some teams cannot afford that delay. They are not, they have to move on. They have to change their focus. They have to do different things. And we call those lagging indicators, right? Because they're like in the future, way too far away for us to make a decision. Don't get me wrong, these are very helpful and useful information, and they're very much correlated with actual user behavior. The first question I asked today was, is there any way to do so before release? To have some sort of evaluation, an original assessment, initial assessment of a metrics, or a way to see how will users react and behave before releasing. And through simple, small sampling and inference, we use all these metrics I showed you earlier to get a glimpse on the quality of the user experience, within a certain level of confidence, of course. And we need both sides, again, a different layer of triangulation here. We need to know early on, and we also need to evaluate this, what we learned, in the future and see correlations, both sides to assess the impact. And the way we do it, it's not only once, so it's not like, okay, we tested with 10 users or 20 or whatever this guy said that we should do with, and then we released, and then, okay, all hell broke loose. That's not what's happening. It's multiple iterations doing similar experiments, and each one of those circles is a different experiment. These are different scores that we can tell that things may go very bad. You might go take a step back and see what went wrong, try to fix things, and then improve, then improve, then improve. This is a good case scenario. There are a lot bad case scenarios. I'm not saying that this will work every time, but it's better to know rather than not knowing. If you release and this 85 becomes a 65, that's a problem. You know that somewhere, something is not working properly for you. So a few references on this kind of work, because we did not come up with this, of course. Metrics, instrumentation of similar measurements, and of course psychometrics is something that psychology and in research has been developing for years. We had the chance to work with some of those people, so Jeff Sauro, Colin Cooper, and Albert Antulis, very good books, very good references to go back, and if you want to try this with your team and give it a chance, and make this kind of iteration of continuous measurement and continuous improvement, I will highly suggest to have a look at this. Thank you so much.
Yeah, let's see if we have some questions.
Yes. It was very nice. Thank you, Sotiris.
Yeah, great insights. Thank you. Please, an applause for Sotiris.
Thank you.
Do you want to
Yeah.
take the first one?
I mean, I can read.
You can
Oh,
read.
do you
I
want-
know you can read.
Do you want to say it out loud? Yeah, sure. Great.
But I will read this to you also, okay? From your experience so far, how do you feel that observability tools could improve in the future, AI included? Just
I like that part, comma, AI included.
comma. Good.
There's a lot of lack in the space because of the fact that, don't get this the wrong way, engineers have been building products for a long time for other engineers. The engineers are the subject matter experts. They have absolute knowledge of what is needed in this space in terms of information. There are some ergonomics, there are some heuristics, and some product design dimensions that are left out of the equation. And I think that having designers in your teams, having researchers in your teams greatly improves this. And all research shows that the teams that have developed this, the way that the product looks like and not a platform looks like, have better retention and have better understanding and efficiency for the users. AI is, of course, here to improve things. There are multiple ways to do so. There are multiple ways to apply AI in different layers. We're not there yet. But one thing that some AI tools do well is summarize data. So we're getting there sooner than other areas. And these engineers need to make decisions fast, on-call engineers. So to have a consolidation of data will greatly help these particular tools.
Great.
Okay, thanks. Do we have time for another question? Yeah.
Yes.
So let's take the second one. Can you share a story where the collected measurements had a great impact on the user experience?
I was expecting exactly the opposite, like a bad impact.
Yeah, but that's
that'll
more
be-
often, you
that'll
know.
be- yeah,
That's
that's more often, exactly, yeah. And I think that some of the metrics that I showed earlier are a very good assessment of this. We measure a particular tool. There's a thing called health checks. I mentioned it a couple of times. It showcases the health of a specific system. We tried to measure it at the beginning, and we saw that usability was very good of the tool. Like, we were very happy with usability. Utility was not as good as we expected. There was some sort of, I wouldn't say deterioration, but we found a very difficult problem to solve that we had to solve later on, which is some engineers use a very specific way of building things, and they can do that only through a CLI tool. It doesn't matter what dashboard or platform or UI you serve to them, they will still use the black and white screen. That's it, what they need, just the code basis. And we learned that, and through multiple iterations of this same process, we segmented our users in two groups. One, the group that could benefit from our solution and move on with the solution that we have created, and then we strategized and created a brand new solution for this different set of users. So the research in that particular example that I gave you did not have to do with the platform itself, but it helped us a lot with the strategy and split this kind of segmentation to two different types of users, two different archetypes, if you will.
Yeah, that's very interesting. The third one is not a question, so I will take it. It's a statement. The Art of Choosing by Sina Iyengar is also a nice book.
Yeah.
Have you read it?
No,
Seems
I
like a
haven't.
statement.
No,
That's
but okay.
awesome.
Thank
Yeah,
you for
thank you so much for
the.
that. Yeah,
Yeah, I would like more details.
I like that. Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Thank
It was
you.
great having you.
Thank you.